Hey, we're going to take a look at Psalm 52 right now. So if you want to go ahead and turn there, you can. Before we dive in, uh, the psalm that we're going to get here is as we're going to see in the superscript at the beginning, it's going to come from a specific story from the life of David. That's in First Samuel chapter 22. If you want to, after we read the psalm, if you want to go and read the story that this comes out of, I would encourage you to do that and take a look at it. But 1 Samuel 22 is where you'll find kind of the beginning of this story. And then after that story plays out, we get this psalm from David. So we'll dive in and we'll explain a little bit of it as we go. Okay, Psalm 52. To the choir master, Maskil of David, when Doeg the Edomite came and told Saul, David has come to the house of Ahimelech. Okay? And then we'll talk a little bit about that once we get done. But verse 1, why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all the day. Your tongue plots destruction like a razor, like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good and lying more than speaking what is right. Selah. You love all words that devour, O deceitful tongue. But God will break you down forever. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. Selah. The righteous shall see and fear and shall laugh at him, saying, see the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and sought refuge in his own destruction. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. I will thank you forever because you have done it. I will wait for your name, for it is good in the presence of the godly. Okay, so what's happening in this story, if you haven't gone back to read it yet, David decides to leave the court of Saul because Saul has tried for a second time to murder David. And if you know the stories of all that stuff and you read it, then you kind of understand what's happening there. But Saul was the king. David was the anointed king. And Saul did not like that. And so he tried to kill him and things like that over and over. And went on the run and all these things, okay? And so what happened was David left the courts of Saul and really went as a refuge or a refugee. He didn't have anywhere to turn. He didn't have any power to do anything. So he sought protection from the priests. And he went to the priests and he sought protection. They helped supply him and get him out. And then Doeg, who was an Edomite and also a counselor of the king, went to Saul and told him that David has received help from the priests. And then the order goes out from Saul to Doeg to go arrest the priests and then to basically execute all of the priests. And so this psalm comes in the aftermath of what's happening there. Okay, so this psalm, the first part of this psalm, and really the entire thing is almost written to this man who was a servant of Saul, Doeg. It's written basically to him as a warning, and then also as a kind of a casting judgment upon him from God. And so let's talk about what he's saying here. So verses 1 through 3 set up who Doeg is. Why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? That's who he's talking about. Doeg was a official of the court. He was an executioner. He was, by all accounts, a very strong man, a very well-off man. He would be considered a mighty man both then and today. Why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all the day, right? Your tongue plots destruction. Like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good and lying more than speaking what is right. Okay, so we see here the accusation that David is kind of leveling at Doeg is he's talking about the sinfulness of his heart. Now remember, we've talked about this before, but in Psalms, so much of the evil that is done and that David talks about in Psalms, the violence that is done isn't even physical violence, but it's violence of the word, violence of the mouth, violence of the tongue. And what David is accusing Doeg here of is first of all, malice, saying that his tongue is doing mischief, right? It's cutting like a sharp razor. That's what his tongue is doing, like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You're plotting the destruction of good people and good men for your own gain. You're lying about it with a deceitful tongue. You are telling falsehoods about what happened so that you can be seen as greater than them. You're devising this mischief, and not only that, not only are you in sin, not only are you in sin by speaking malice against the priest, not only are you there by being deceitful in what you're saying and lying about what you're saying, but not only that, in verse 4 he says this, you love all words that devour, O deceitful tongue. Not only are you in sin, but you love that sin. You love the power it brings you. You love the feeling that it gives you. You have an affection to that sin and not to doing the work of God and what God has called you to do. And so it's really an accusation here from David to Doeg that this is who you are. You are full of malice, you are deceitful, you are sinful, you are evil. But even beyond that, you don't even feel bad for it. You love it. And I think that there's a separation there to be made, because when we look at some of the stories of David as we go on, I mean, we see that he's sinful, that he does all kinds of things that go against the Word of God. But the difference is that David never loves that. It tears him apart whenever that happens. He feels it, he deals with it, and he feels the weight of his sin on his life. This Doeg does not. You love all words that devour a deceitful tongue, right? But what happens? Okay, here's the accusation. What's the judgment now? What's the punishment? Verse 5, but God will break you down forever. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. That's some pretty heavy stuff. Now, I want us to understand and be clear here that this is a psalm to a specific person. Okay, this judgment that is being cast is not being cast towards everybody. This judgment is being cast towards Doeg because of his unrighteousness, because of his deceitfulness, because of his malice, because of his sin. But the judgment is this: God will break you down forever. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him, saying, see the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in abundance of his riches and sought refuge in his own destruction. And so what we see here in this judgment of Doeg being brought about by the hands of David, we see really a comparison of two types of people. We see a comparison of a mighty man of the world with a deceitful tongue who's gained power and position through not only his physical prowess, but also through his ability to speak deceitfully and to sow lies and malice into the courts of King Saul. We have this compared with and contrasted with David, who, by all accounts, is a sinner, and we see that again over and over and over again, but one who continually turns to God. The righteous shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him, saying, see the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches, and sought refuge in his own destruction. See, the difference between the godly and the ungodly is that the godly seek refuge in God. The godly seek to place their life and their fate, their future in the hands of God, And the ungodly decide to place it in the strength of their own power or their own wealth or their own position, and sought refuge in their own destruction. That's what the difference is. And so, while Doeg is going to be ripped up, torn from his tent, and uprooted, this is what David says, because he's godly and he placed his trust in God. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. I will thank you forever because you have done it. I will wait for your name, for it is good in the presence of the godly. And again, we get back to this idea, this thought of trusting in God, not trying to gain power or position or prestige by tearing other people down, by spreading lies against other people, by trying to speak malice about them into their life, but by trusting in God to lift us up. And every single day, and I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say this, every single day, each and every one of us has a choice. We have a choice to make about the words we say about others, whether we're going to speak life and truth about others, or we're going to be lying and deceitful and full of malice towards them. This is every day. We have interactions with other people every single day, and every day we have the choice. Are we going to approach these relationships in a godly way, or are we going to approach them in a way where we're trying to get the most out of this relationship that we can, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to put ourselves in a position of power over other people? And every single day we have to wake up and we have to make that choice. And my prayer is that every single time, every single day, we will trust not in our own power, not in the abundance of our riches, not that we would seek refuge in our own destruction, but that we would seek refuge, like David, in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. That's my prayer for us today. I would encourage you to go back and read through this psalm. Go read 1 Samuel 22. Take a look at this story and see how it all kind of fits together. But we want to be like David, not like Doeg, obviously. We want to trust in God, not in our riches, but even more than that. When we sin, we don't want to love our sin. We want to turn to God and flee back to God as fast as we can.